In our previous countdown, we witnessed a world standing on the precipice of the unknown. We discussed the mounting evidence and the whispers from Washington, suggesting that by late 2026, the U.S. government may finally declassify the full extent of the non-human intelligence presence on Earth. But to understand the truth they are preparing to reveal, we must first look back at the shadows they have spent decades trying to erase. Before the recent congressional hearings, and long before the viral Tic Tac videos, there was a place that defined our darkest fears. A place where the line between national security and cosmic horror completely dissolved. Welcome back to Whisper Beyond Archives. We open a file that was never meant to see the light of day. It is the foundation of modern conspiracy, a story of underground labyrinths and a silent war beneath the desert sands. This is the deep dive you've been asking for. The Archuleta Threshold, inside the Dulce base. To understand Dulce, we must begin with a man named Paul Bennewitz, a brilliant physicist, and the owner of an electronics company right across from Kirtland Air Force Base in New Mexico. In late 1979, Bennewitz began witnessing something impossible. From the roof of his home, he recorded silent, glowing orbs dancing over the Manzano Mountains. But he didn't just watch them, he listened. Using high-frequency equipment, Bennewitz intercepted low-frequency electromagnetic signals that seemed to be a form of non-human communication. He tracked the source. Every signal, every pulse, led to one specific, desolate location. Archuleta Mesa, a flat-topped mountain near the tiny town of Dulce. Bennewitz was convinced. He believed he had found the nerve center of an alien invasion. He compiled his findings into a terrifying document titled Project Beta. In it, he described a vast, underground facility shared by the U.S. government and a race of greys. He even mapped out the base's internal structure, long before anyone else dared to speak its name. But here is where the story takes a dark turn. When Bennewitz took his evidence to the Air Force, they didn't silence him with a gag order. Instead, they destroyed him with a lie. An intelligence officer named Richard Doherty was assigned to feed Bennewitz disinformation. They broke into his house. They planted fake equipment. They sent him fake computer data to reinforce his paranoia. They wanted him to believe in aliens so he wouldn't realize he was actually intercepting classified stealth bomber tests. But was that the only truth? Or was the government using a real alien presence to hide a military secret? While using military secrets to hide a real alien presence? Paul Bennewitz eventually suffered a mental breakdown, but the door he opened could never be closed again. He gave the world a name and a location: Dulce. Before the first shovel hit the dirt for the Dulce base, the land itself was crying out. In the mid-1970s, the quiet ranching communities of New Mexico and southern Colorado became the epicenter of a phenomenon that baffled the FBI and terrified the local populace: cattle mutilations. Ranchers would wake up to find their prize bulls dead in the middle of a field. But these weren't predator attacks. These were surgical. Ears, eyes, and reproductive organs were removed with laser-like precision. There was no blood on the ground. Not a single drop. Even more disturbing, the bone was often cut through cleanly, leaving a smell of scorched ozone. Local law enforcement, like Sheriff Gabe Valdez, reported seeing mysterious black, unmarked helicopters hovering over these fields at night. No tail numbers, no lights, just silent giants in the sky. Why Dulce? Why this specific stretch of the 37th parallel? Some researchers believe the soil in this region contains unique mineral compositions. Or perhaps, it was simply the perfect, desolate laboratory. The mutilations weren't random acts of cruelty. They were biological harvesting missions. The organs being taken from the cattle were exactly what Thomas Costello later claimed were being used in the vats of Level 6 to create the nutrient paste that sustains the non-human entities living below. The town of Dulce wasn't just near a base, it was the feeding ground for it. But why Dulce? To understand the location, we must look at a map of the world's most unexplained mysteries. Dulce sits directly on the 37th parallel north, a latitudinal line often called the Paranormal Highway. From the Pentagon to Area 51, and from the ancient ruins of Greece to the subterranean mysteries of China, this line seems to act as a conductor for the unknown. Local Jicarilla Apache legends speak of the Ant people, who lived beneath these very mountains during a great cataclysm. They tell stories of star people, who returned to the Earth to claim what was once theirs. Could the Dulce base be built upon a pre-existing ancient structure? Some whistleblowers suggest that the military didn't dig the deepest levels. They simply found them and then expanded. This adds a chilling layer to the mystery. The government might not be the landlord of Dulce, but merely a tenant to something much older and much more powerful. But how did this happen? How did a foreign, non-human intelligence gain a foothold beneath American soil? The answer lies in a secret meeting that took place in 1954, known as the Greada Treaty. According to whistleblowers like William Cooper and Philip Schneider, the shadow government, under the pressure of a technological arms race, entered into a formal agreement with the entities residing in the Deep Mesa. Deal was simple on the surface, but catastrophic in its fine print. The exchange: technology for sovereignty. The entities offered the U.S. government technology that was centuries ahead of our time: advanced integrated circuits, fiber optics, laser weaponry, and, most importantly, the secrets to anti-gravity propulsion. In exchange, the government granted the entities total autonomy over specific underground sectors, with Dulce being the primary hub. The chilling clause: the abduction quota. But the entities demanded a price. They required access to the human biological pool for research. The treaty allegedly authorized a limited number of human abductions, provided that the entities submitted a list of the victims to the National Security Council (NSC), and ensured the subjects were returned unharmed with their memories wiped. The Great Betrayal. By the late 1960s, the shadow government realized they had made a deal with the devil. The entities were not providing the lists, they were abducting thousands more than agreed upon, and many of these victims, men, women, and children, never returned. They were being taken to the lower levels of Dulce, used as raw biological material in the genetic vats. The government found itself in a trap. They were addicted to the alien technology for their black budget weapon programs. Yet they were powerless to stop the human harvest. This deal turned the U.S. military into a janitor service for an alien hive. When Philip Schneider discovered the scale of this betrayal, that his own government was effectively selling its citizens to a nightmare, it was the spark that eventually led to the bloody insurrection of 1979. The question that haunts every researcher is, how? How does a secret cabal within the U.S. government communicate with a civilization that has existed beneath our feet, or among the stars, for eons? It wasn't through radio waves or public diplomacy. It was a dark, calculated process of signal and sacrifice. 1. The first signal: atomic resonance. According to leaked documents from the MJ-12 group, the true beacon that brought the entities to the bargaining table was the atomic bomb. The Trinity test in 1945 didn't just rattle the desert of New Mexico. It tore a hole in the fabric of space-time. The entities at Dulce, and those beyond, detected the unique electromagnetic signature of nuclear fission. It was a signal that humanity had become a Euclid, global threat, but also a viable partner. 2. The first contact: the 1954 Muroc meeting. The most widely cited account of the handshake occurred in February 1954 at what is now Edwards Air Force Base, then Muroc Airfield. President Eisenhower was officially listed as being on a dentist visit, but whistleblowers claim he was whisked away to a secret hangar. The deep state met with a group known as the Aquinas, tall grays. The communication was not spoken, it was telepathic. The entities projected images, concepts, and technical blueprints directly into the minds of the human negotiators. This telepathic interface is why the deep state became so obsessed with mind control projects like MKUltra. They were trying to bridge the communication gap with the entities. 3. The mediators. The secret science of the liaison. To maintain a permanent line of communication, a specific group was formed within the deep state, the Jason Society. Their job was to translate the alien science into human terms. At the Dulce base, the contact happened through electronic frequency bridges. In the lower levels, specific rooms were built with high-frequency resonators that allowed the human staff to enter a state of consciousness where they could hear the entities. It was a bridge of light and sound. 4. The deal: technological crack. The deep state was lured in by what Philip Schneider called technological crack. The entities provided a small taste of advanced energy, free energy systems, and gravity-defying metals, but they withheld the source code. To get the next, dose of technology, the government had to grant more access, build more bases, and look the other way during more abductions. By the time the public realized something was wrong, the deep state was no longer in control. They had become the junior partners in a business where the entities owned the factory, the equipment, and eventually, the people. If the 37th parallel is the where, then the cattle mutilations are the why. Since the 1960s, the area surrounding Dulce, New Mexico, has been the global epicenter for a phenomenon that defies biological explanation. Thousands of cattle have been found dead, but these are not predator attacks. The surgical precision. When investigators arrive at the scene of a mutilation near the Archuleta Mesa, they find a recurring pattern that terrifies even seasoned veterinarians. Large, circular patches of skin are removed with laser-like precision. There are no jagged edges, no teeth marks. The wounds look as if they were cauterized at a molecular level. The cells are not crushed, but sliced clean. Specific organs are always missing: the eyes, the tongue, the genitals, and the rectum. These are the soft tissues highest in DNA concentration and hormonal output. But the most chilling detail? The animals are completely exsanguinated. Every single drop of blood is gone, yet there is not a single drop found on the grass around the carcass. It is as if the animal was lifted into the air, processed in a sterile environment, and then dropped back down from a height, often breaking its bones upon impact. The Level 3 connection. Why cattle? According to the Dulce papers leaked by Thomas Costello, the answer lies on Level 3 of the facility. The entities, specifically the greys, require biological material for two reasons: sustenance and synthesis. Because the greys have a degenerated digestive system, they cannot eat like humans. They absorb nutrients through their skin by immersing themselves in vats of a thick, amber-colored liquid. This liquid is a biological soup composed of bovine blood, specialized hormones, and glandular secretions harvested from these very mutilations. But it goes deeper. On Level 3, Costello witnessed geneticists crossing bovine DNA with human and alien strands. They were looking for a way to stabilize the small gray clones, using the robust immune systems of cattle to patch the genetic holes in their own dying race. The human cost. This is where the mystery turns into a nightmare. In the late 1970s, investigators found that the same surgical patterns seen in cattle were beginning to appear in reports of human missing persons. The abduction quota mentioned in the Greada Treaty wasn't just for observation, it was for the harvest. The cattle were merely the prototype. The biological factory beneath Dulce was perfecting its techniques on livestock before moving on to its ultimate goal: the manipulation and consumption of the human biological blueprint. The scale of this phenomenon is not just anecdotal, it is backed by staggering, cold, hard numbers. Between 1970 and 1980, it is estimated that over 10,000 head of cattle were mutilated across the United States, with a massive concentration in the Four Corners region, specifically around Dulce, New Mexico. The financial impact. The economic toll was so severe that in 1979 the FBI was forced to open an official investigation codenamed Operation Animal Mutilation. Ranchers in New Mexico alone were losing millions of dollars. In a single year, some counties reported a 300% increase in unexplained livestock deaths. But even with the full resources of the Department of Justice, not a single person was ever arrested, and not a single conviction was ever made. The impossible logistics. What truly baffled investigators was the time-to-kill ratio. Forensic veterinarians noted that many of these surgical procedures, removing the eyes, the heart, and the entire blood supply, would take a team of skilled surgeons at least 3 to 4 hours in a sterile hospital setting. Yet these animals were being found in remote pastures, often just 30 minutes after they had last been seen alive by the ranchers. Furthermore, there were zero tracks, no tire marks, no footprints, and no blood trails within a 50-foot radius of the carcass. In some cases, the bodies were found in the middle of fresh snow or deep mud, with the ground around the animal completely undisturbed. The Dulce radius. Statisticians noticed a chilling correlation. The density of these cases increased significantly the closer you got to the Archuleta Mesa. In the 50-mile radius surrounding the Dulce base, the frequency of mutilations was 6 times higher than the national average. This led Philip Schneider and Thomas Costello to the same terrifying conclusion: These weren't random acts of cultists or predators. These were biological supply runs. The numbers prove that Dulce was not just a base. It was a hungry machine that required a constant influx of fresh biological material to fuel the genetic experiments happening on level 3 and beyond. The Greada Treaty had one fatal flaw. It relied on the honesty of a civilization that viewed humans as biological commodities. Initially, the agreement focused on cattle, but by the mid-1970s, the deep state realized that the entities had shifted their focus. They weren't just harvesting livestock anymore, they were harvesting us. The shift from cattle to humans. Investigators began to notice a terrifying trend. The same surgical precision, the same bloodless extractions found in the pastures of New Mexico, began appearing in cold cases of missing persons. Local law enforcement near Dulce reported an unprecedented spike in vanished hikers, tourists, and even local residents. These weren't typical kidnappings. These people were being taken from secure locations, leaving behind zero evidence of a struggle. The horror of Level 6, Nightmare Hall. The true reason for the insurrection of 1979 was the discovery of Level 6, known among the staff as Nightmare Hall. This was the facility's biological processing center. When security technicians like Thomas Costello and engineers like Philip Schneider gained access to this level, they found the ultimate violation of the treaty. They saw rows upon rows of humans in suspended animation, men, women, and children, kept in glass vats. These victims weren't being studied, they were being dismantled. Their biological components were being used to create hybrid, human gray entities, and their DNA was being spliced in agonizing experiments to fix the alien genetic decay. The breaking point, the deal, turned sour because the entities stopped asking for permission. They began taking high-ranking military personnel and scientists as lab rat. When the deep state confronted the entities, the response was cold and telepathic. We are not your guests. We are your evolution. The government realized they had lost control of the base. The Blue Berets, the elite secret security force, were no longer guarding a laboratory. They were guarding a slaughterhouse. This moral realization, combined with the discovery that the entities were planning to expand this harvest globally, is what led the internal resistance to take up arms. The 1979 war wasn't just a firelight. It was a desperate, last-ditch attempt by human soldiers to reclaim their species from a predator they had accidentally invited in. The Archuleta Mesa is a silent sentinel in the New Mexico desert. On the surface, it is nothing but rock and scrub. But according to the leaked documents of Thomas Costello, a former security chief at the facility, the mountain is merely a shell. Beneath it lies a 7-story subterranean fortress, powered by a hidden nuclear reactor, and connected to other secret sites by a high-speed maglev shuttle system. As we descend, the air changes. It becomes cold, sterile, and heavy with the smell of ozone and chemicals. Level 1 and 2 are the administrative hubs. Here, security is tight but appears conventional. Human guards and Secret Service personnel move through hallways illuminated by flickering fluorescent lights. To a casual observer, it looks like any other top-secret military facility. Level 3 houses the management and government contractor offices. It is a place of bureaucracy, where the paperwork for humanity's darkest secrets is filed. But it is at Level 4 where the human element begins to fade. This is the floor dedicated to human aura research and telepathy experiments. It is here that the boundary between science and the occult blurs. Witnesses speak of dream manipulation technologies, machines designed to map the human consciousness and remote view the minds of world leaders. Further down, at Level 5, the environment shifts drastically. This is the alien housing sector. The ceilings are higher. The symbols on the walls are no longer in English. Human staff are strictly prohibited from entering without high-level clearance and psychic shielding. This is where the Greys and the Reptilians reside, existing in a tense, cold alliance with the shadow government. And then, we reach Level 6. The staff at Dulce called it Nightmare Hall. Imagine a vast, industrial space filled with thousands of glass vats. Inside these containers, suspended in a thick, amniotic fluid, are things that should not exist. Human-animal hybrids. Humans with multiple limbs. Creatures that look like a fusion of gray aliens and terrestrial creatures. According to Costello, the screams of the conscious subjects could be heard echoing through the ventilation shafts. This wasn't just research. This was a genetic slaughterhouse to engineer a new being, a hybrid capable of surviving the environmental collapse of the future, or perhaps a race of slaves designed to serve their new masters. Level 7 is even more mysterious. It is the cold storage floor. Thousands of humans, kept in a state of suspended animation, rows upon rows of souls on ice. Some say they are abductees who never returned. Others say they are the biological fuel for the experiments on the floors above. This is the map of Dulce, a vertical descent into the darkest corners of a human and non-human imagination. The Dulce base was more than just a laboratory. It was a masterpiece of psychological isolation. According to leaked security manuals, personnel were subjected to intense screening before every shift. Each employee was assigned a specific flash color, a security level that restricted them to certain hallways. The elevators didn't have buttons for every floor. They were controlled by magnetic keycards and biometric scanners that read the unique frequency of a person's iris. If you were cleared for level 2, you literally could not see the entrance to level 3. Even the air was compartmentalized. The ventilation system was designed to isolate different sectors in case of a biological breach. But the most haunting detail shared by whistleblowers was the frequency fence. Certain areas of the base emitted a low decibel hum, an infrasound frequency designed to induce a state of compliance and suppress intense emotions like fear or aggression in the human staff. They weren't just guarding the base, they were being chemically and frequency controlled to ensure they never asked the wrong questions. This is why it took someone like Thomas Costello, a man trained to notice the invisible, to finally see the cracks in the facade. He noticed that the aliens weren't guests. They were the ones running the security protocols. We weren't their partners, we were their property. Thomas Costello was a security specialist who saw too much. The breaking point came when he encountered a young woman in the level 6 laboratories. She was heavily drugged, but she whispered a name. It was the name of a person who had been reported missing months earlier. Costello realized then that the human subjects were abductees. Risking a death sentence, he smuggled out the Dulce papers, photos of the vats and hybrid creatures. He stole a security videotape showing the gray entities in their living quarters. In 1979, Costello vanished, leaving his family behind to protect them. To this day, his photos remain the holy grail of Dulce research. He didn't leave for fame. He left because he couldn't live with the screams from level 6 echoing in his head. Critics, of course, demand proof, and the Dulce papers are not the only evidence brought forward. Over the years, strange physical anomalies have been recorded around Archuleta Mesa. Independent researchers have captured high-level radiation spikes that occur without warning. Hikers have reported hearing heavy machinery operating deep beneath their feet in areas where no infrastructure exists. And then there are the electronic echoes. To this day, radio enthusiasts occasionally pick up scrambled high-speed data bursts originating from the mountain, bursts that modern decryption software cannot break. While skeptics claim Dulce is a modern myth designed to distract from real military testing, the sheer volume of consistent testimony from unrelated witnesses, from janitors to generals, makes it one of the most difficult cases to dismiss. If it is a lie, it is the most well-coordinated lie in human history. We have seen the map. We have heard the whispers of the man who guarded the gates of hell. But the most terrifying chapter of the Dulce story isn't the experiments. It's what happened when the humans finally tried to fight back. What happens when the world's most elite soldiers are sent into a tunnel against a technology they cannot comprehend? In Part 2, we go back to August 1979. We meet the man who survived the fire, Philip Schneider, and we witness the secret war that changed the course of human history. This is Whisper Beyond Archives. Stay curious, stay vigilant, and whatever you do, don't look too deep into the dark.